Hey, yo, I want to talk about Universes Beyond. I don't like it, but thanks to a recent decision by Wizards of the Coast, that may be about to change. I want to demonstrate the line of thinking that leads so many Magic players to feeling negatively about the game, and then discuss a potential path forward that could keep everyone happy. See, I had a revelation from a bunch of unrelated Magic topics that include Lorwyn Eclipsed, the shareholder lawsuit, Kermit the Frog, the Fallout franchise, Brandon Sanderson, Elden Ring, and you guys. And while you would be correct in saying all of that is unrelated, I think that if you took a step back and view each topic as a piece in a larger puzzle, you might have the same revelation I had regardless of your feelings on Universes Beyond. So to cut to the chase, in this video I want to share with you the potential evidence, experiences, and reasoning that may lead someone like myself to being a Universes Beyond hater, discuss how that kind of thinking can be quite insular and isn't exactly representative of the larger picture, and then talk about how I think WotC recently demonstrated that not only can Universes Beyond work for everyone, but work in such a way that it genuinely excites me, a miserable fuck. Because I hate Universes Beyond. So if I can be made to love it, and I do mean love, then I assume the same will be true for others like me. If WotC can implement the change they just recently implied is possible. You got all that? Well, let's start with an anecdote. I was recently invited to play a game of Commander with a group of friends of a friend. I don't know these people, but they're also technically not strangers to me. Now, I'm not proud to admit that when I saw one of them had Ms. Bumbleflower as a commander, but the other two were running Preston, Garvey, Minuteman, and the dog, I instinctively rolled my eyes. I don't want to have rolled my eyes, but again, I'm a miserable old fuck and I don't like Universes Beyond. I like to be immersed in the world and flavour of Magic the Gathering. I don't want to think about Ninja Turtles and I don't want to spend an evening being reminded of how annoying it is to be constantly told a settlement needs my help. But I'm a big advocate for compromise during play, I'm in their space, and maybe in the future if I thought we'd play again I could gauge their interest in an in-universe cards only night, or something, or not, or whatever, it's only a game. But for now, I was just going to shut up and think about how one time in a video I said the protagonist of Fallout should eat the dog. So the game goes on and I see a lot of Magic cards, some more Fallout ones, a couple of Doctor Who cards, I think one of them had a Jurassic Park in there, and probably some other Universes Beyond that I'm forgetting. But for whatever reason, and because they're not total strangers, when one of them played a Bloodthirster, I said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd have any 40k cards." To which they replied, and I shit you not, "What's that?" And I said, "You know, Warhammer?" To 3 blank expressions of unrecognition, which made me want to flip the table. Now, the reason I've shared with you such an unflattering story about my inner monologue is because I want to highlight just how broad the spectrum of players can be when it comes to entrenchment into hobby games. How difficult it must be for developers to try and keep all of these players with their varying expectations happy, and exactly how divisive Universes Beyond remains. Because I think upon hearing that story, many of you will say, yeah, I've had similar thoughts and experiences, I also don't like Universes Beyond. While many others of you will say, wow, you sound like a dick, aren't Universes Beyond haters just a misery to play against? Why don't you just forget about the flavour and have fun with it, it's only a game. And if that second one is you, then you know what? You're right. Universes Beyond haters are unhappy, and when we play, we'll probably express that unhappiness. We feel that WotC is ruining the game that we love in exchange for short-term financial gains. The flavour and narratives of Magic's original setting is being sacrificed on the altar of quarterly profits. And judging by the fact that WotC are being sued by their shareholders, this line of thinking is not exclusive to Universes Beyond haters. Now, I'm not a lawyer, just a humble Pathfinder content creator. But from what I understand, the major complaint in this lawsuit is that Wizards of the Coast are overprinting Magic cards, thus destroying their secondary market value and collectability, which has an adverse effect on the long-term health of the game, and then lying to their shareholders about it. This accusation is supported by a Bank of America report from 2022 that investigated WotC's strategy of overprinting cards for short-term gains, a report that resulted in the value of Hasbro's stock falling, which according to this article meant at the time it was down 44% year to date. Ouch. I'll slip this in now because I don't know where else I'd get to mention it, but I don't think this lawsuit will result in the massive changes that many are speculating. I get the feeling Hasbro's legal teams are too big and ultimately this lawsuit will result in nothing. Though again, what do I know? But this lawsuit claims that the reason WotC are overprinting cards is to account for shortfalls in other elements of the company's businesses, and that new sets were being parachuted in to provide additional revenue. And while none of this mentions Universes Beyond specifically, if we go back to 2023 and look at the original roadmap WotC laid out for 2025, we can see, in that year we were supposed to get Innistrad Remastered, a set themed around racing, then a return to Tarkir, next a sci-fi space opera set, and finally a return to Lorwyn, meaning a master set and 4 standard sets in a year, just like Mama used to make. Weirdly, the Final Fantasy set had already been announced prior to the publication of this article, and yet they didn't list it here for some reason. I'll let you decide whether you think that's evidence of Final Fantasy being parachuted in or not. But if we look at what we actually got in 2025, you'll see that yes, we did start with Innistrad Remastered, then onto the racing theme set Aetherdrift, and the return to Tarkir with Dragonstorm, all correct so far, but as I mentioned, the schedule is upset as Final Fantasy is squeezed in at that point. Then we get the sci-fi set Edge of Eternities, but next we get Spider-Man instead of the promised Lorwyn set, and an additional unmentioned set in the form of Avatar. We went from 4 sets in a year to 6, with one of the originally planned sets not even seeing a release until 2026. And of the sets that seemingly got added in, all of them are Universes Beyond. Is that evidence of them being parachuted in? Well, it's not for me to determine, but I think if overprinting is a problem, from my perspective it certainly seems that Universes Beyond is to blame. And it's these kind of issues, on top of the inclusion of cards that at best break immersion, if not outright feel like cheap advertising, that may make someone like myself ask, why are we doing this? The argument WotC used to tell us that Universes Beyond is needed is because it brings in so many new players. But then they also turn around and say the largest audience for Universes Beyond is existing players by a huge margin. The vast majority of Universes Beyond purchases are people who currently play Magic, many of which have played for a long time. The second largest group are lapsed players. Universes Beyond has proven very good at bringing back people who used to play Magic, with only the third group being new players, and the fourth being collectors. The massive success of Lorwyn Eclipsed appears to prove that WotC don't need Universes Beyond to make record sales, and while my personal experiences are only anecdotal, it seems to me players who aren't enfranchised care so little about the flavour of the cards they play, they're not even familiar with the IPs being represented. To them this is just a Magic card, exactly the same as this one, or this, and just the same as this. Oh no wait, sorry, obviously not that one. I mean this, to most players it's all the same. I've mentioned Universes Beyond many times on this channel and I do try to read as many comments as I can, and the most frequent argument I get to the complaints I raise is, Universes Beyond cards are fun to play, the flavour doesn't matter. So if that's a common rebuttal, then I feel people can be forgiven for thinking that when it comes to external IPs, most players don't care about the flavour if the gameplay is good. Casual players don't even register that the flavour is a thing. WotC need the flavour to attract new players so little that by printing so much of it they may actually be damaging the brand. And finally, there's people like myself who actively dislike external IPs. And so logically, if 3 out of 4 groups think the flavour is irrelevant, why not attempt to please the one group that does actually care about it then? Because if everyone else is indifferent, then they won't care either way, right? Well, this line of thinking does overlook those first 2 groups we mentioned earlier. Sure, of that first group, I imagine a large amount of existing players who buy Universes Beyond aren't doing so because they like the IP, but instead because they're just existing players and would have bought a new Magic set regardless. But that won't be true for all of them, and probably isn't true for the people enticed back to the game after seeing their favourite characters and worlds represented. Meaning there's actually going to be a 5th group of people who genuinely like Universes Beyond. That's not to say that Universes Beyond haters are wrong, they're not, I'm one of them, but it does mean that Magic is in a binary position where it can either please one group or the other. And looking at the lineup for 2026, it's obvious which group WotC chose. But I have long since wondered if there's a way to keep the entire spectrum of players happy. From those who don't want any Universes Beyond sets, to the players who are turning up specifically for them. As I said, I'm an advocate for compromise. In a previous video, I discussed how I felt the Godzilla cards were the best way to do this, as they're actual factual Magic cards that have a reskin of an external IP, but only if you so desire, resulting in, I feel, the best of both worlds, as it gives players the choice in what cards they play, and what they choose to picture when a card is played against them. Just like I didn't think twice when those guys I was playing against threw a 40k Blasphemous Act onto the table, because I just imagined the Innistrad version as my board was wiped. Immersion unbroken, and that's all I'm asking for. But with the release of Lorwyn Eclipsed, to my surprise, WotC proved there can be an even better way than the Godzilla method. Advertising. Tell me in the comments, how many of you saw the adverts for Lorwyn? How many of you saw that WotC had partnered with the Jim Henson company? How many of you got more hyped to play the set because of this crossover? Now let me ask you, how many Muppets cards were printed in the set? How many Sesame Street ones? Fraggle Rock cards? Farscape ones? Labyrinth ones? The Dark Crystal cards? None, right? And yet, how many of you felt more favourably towards the set because of the association formed between it and the Jim Henson Creature Shop thanks to these adverts? I know my level of excitement for Lorwyn was certainly influenced by the ad, because I like Muppets. And to go back to these groups again, it seems to me that's the intended effect of a Universes Beyond product, making people already familiar with Magic more excited for sets thanks to a crossover. Imagine if Mario Kart was featured in the ads for Aphrodrift, with a fully animated scene of Donkey Kong throwing that blue shell card at Bowser or whatever. Well, let's pick some IPs that WotC have actually worked with. Why not have Nathan Drake and Lara Croft climbing a floating rock in the adverts for the next Return to Zendikar? Or do you remember how the initial wave of advertising for Elden Ring was based around George R.R. Martin's involvement in the project? Why can't Magic have a success story like that? We're presumably already paying for all this licensing, so rather than awkwardly replicating a creative's pre-existing work into a system not designed for it, why not ask that creative to make something wholly original for Magic? I talked a couple of weeks ago about how people seem to like Brandon Sanderson's work. He's already written a Magic book before, so why not ask if he'd be willing to lay the foundation of world building for a brand new set? I bet Sanderson fans would love that, while for everyone else it would just be a regular Magic set. Imagine if instead of a Final Fantasy set, where every game had to be crammed into one, leaving people like myself confused and uninterested as we hadn't played those games, we instead had Cloud, and who I assume is his lover, advertising an original Magic world designed to work fully within Magic's 5-colour system, but one that replicates the vibes of Final Fantasy. I'd have liked that. I imagine it would be a bit like Neon Dynasty but with in-universe versions of these cards. But more importantly, while playing Magic I'd still be thinking about Magic, and not trying to work out why the Esper cards are in green and red. And we could still do the Godzilla style reskins for people who want to see their favourite characters represented, and I don't see why we can't do it on every card. Spider-Man has proven that WotC are capable of commissioning alternative art for entire sets, and most of them wouldn't even need new names, just like I mentioned before with Blasphemous Act. And yes, it would be confusing for the few that would require new names on the alternative versions of the same card, but first, that's already the reality that we're living in. Second, that's already the reality that we're living in. And third, that's already the reality that we're living in. So why not pull the trigger and keep Magic sets as in-universe Magic sets? Use Vin Diesel in the adverts the next time you want to do a set about vehicles or street sharks or whatever, and have all art reskins for those that want them. Which is what I thought the point of Secret Lair was in the first place anyway. Surely this way everyone would be happy. Magic stays true to itself for those that care about the flavour. Every set becomes technically a Universes Beyond set, so we don't need to overprint anything. Casuals still get their crossover cards if they want them, and everyone else gets to play the game without people who care about the flavour bitching so much. Universes Beyond would do its job of advertising the game to encourage sales. Adverts work best as adverts. Adverts should not be the product itself. WotC have proven this can be done, so let's make it the model going forward. And if that happens, I would be able to unironically say that I love Universes Beyond. Because this was great. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I worry that some of you will say the Jim Henson company doing puppetry for Lorwyn doesn't really count as a crossover, because the Creature Shop isn't really an intellectual property. And to that I would say, we got Furby horror cards. Logic in this regard is no longer a factor. Dwight Bloody Schrute. Thank you very much for watching this video, and thank you to everyone that supports me, like 27 publications, Eggboy the Particle that permeates all existence, Blank Space, Wanpako Jozu, Miss Murder, a random Patreon, Ominous Jazz, and the rest of my patrons whose names are on screen now. I'd also like to thank the sponsor for this video, me and my Patreon page, where you can get your name credited on screen too. Check it out in the link in the description below. Hit the like button, leave a comment, tell me who's your favourite Muppet, and most importantly subscribe and share this video with a friend. Hey, I'm just going to jump into the credits because I didn't really know where else to include this, but as you may be able to tell, this video was in production for quite some time. I actually started work on it before Lorwyn was even released, based just off of the advertising that I saw at the time. But sometimes other things come up and animation takes a while. But anyway, this is just a quick update to let you know that the lawsuit that I mentioned, I think has been resolved or withdrawn or something. Again, not a lawyer. But that kind of makes sense to me because I don't know, I think if you're trying to prove that the long-term health of the game is being damaged by WotC's current actions, you're going to have a hard time proving that, considering that seemingly they're breaking sales records regularly and always talking about new player numbers, and while I understand where they're coming from, I just think you'd have a hard time proving it in court. So yeah, I don't exactly know what's going on with that lawsuit, but I couldn't really figure out a way to include this in the main video without just entirely removing the section where I talk about it, which I didn't really want to do, because it feeds into the larger idea that is prevalent within the player base that Magic are overprinting cards, which in turn is a problem that's resolved by making the Universe Beyond products just advertising or reskins of actual in-universe products. Oh, and while I want to rant, one thing I didn't mention in the video is that, yeah, my suggestion would mean more work for WotC, but that's what we pay them for, so screw them. But anyway, back to the rest of the credits. Bye! Hit the notification bell and do all those things the algorithm loves. If you agree or disagree with any of my points, or you want to see me do a video on another subject, let me know, and I will see you next time. We instead had Cloud and who I assume is his lover advertising. That's going to upset people.